Hi there, I'm your host, and today we're going to be talking about crippling depression. Not mine, not yours, not anybody else's, but the United States in the 1930s. All starting with the Great Crash of October 1929. So, basically, as soon as Hoover gets into office, the stock market crashes pretty fucking terribly. As a result of people buying way too many stocks and shares and shit, otherwise known as things you can look up in about 5 minutes that I'm not going to explain to you. All you need to know is that the stock market crashed because everybody kept on buying shit from credit, the banks were unregulated and unprotected by the government, and everything started failing. Especially farms, which were already failing because they were overproducing things, which kind of sucks. And so Hoover was basically 7 months into his presidency before everything started going to absolute shit. And then after a little while, he went like, guys, I mean, everything is, it's gonna be fine. You just kind of need to let laissez-faire do its thing and, be capitalist and just buy shit. You know, you gotta do your own work. You gotta be your own man. You gotta get your own job and shit. And then everybody else that's in America is looking at that statement and going like, you're a fucking dumbass. Because he kind of was. And so, shanty towns are starting to pop up. They call them Hoovervilles because fuck President Hoover. And there's this thing called the bonus army, which was basically a bunch of World War I veterans going like, hey, we want pensions. And Hoover going like, go fuck yourself. So, kind of sucked. And also, state governors and governments would start declaring bank holidays so that not all of the banks would fail. Even though, essentially, all of the banks failed. Wasn't really a good thing. But then comes along this guy named FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. New face of the Democratic Party, coming in promising a new deal for the American people. Because you've been getting a shitty deal from them Republicans like fucking Hoover. So now I'm gonna grant you a new deal. It's socialism. Oh fucking boy. And so he got together a brain trust of a bunch of smart people to get together and make solutions to everything. And he also had frequent fireside chats with the nation over radio, being like, alright guys, I know things are pretty shit, but we're trying. We're trying. Have hope and stuff. And even though him and his wife actually had a lot of tensions in between them, it kind of projected an image of American hope and stuff and things. And so, in the first 100 days of his term, they would do a whole lot of shit. First, repealed the Volstead Act and legalized beer in preparation for the repealing of prohibition so that we could get that sweet, sweet tax money from everybody drinking alcohol to forget their problems. There is the establishment of the Civilian Conservation Corps, which just gave jobs to people from the government so that not only could we have jobs, we could have jobs doing shit like pruning trees and building parks and all sorts of cool shit. There's the Federal Emergency Relief Act that just gave money to people who were broke and didn't have any income, and the Tennessee Valley Authority that would control floods on the Tennessee River. I mean, that seems pretty obvious. And there's the Agricultural Adjustment Act that would shore up farm prices, kind of like that McNary-Haugen bill that never passed. But yeah. And there was a Glass-Steagall Act that started to regulate the banks, along with the National Employment System Act, the Homeowners Refinance Act, the Farm Credit Act, the Railroad Coordination Act, and perhaps the most significant, the National Industrial Recovery Act, establishing stuff like the Public Works Administration and the National Recovery Administration. And yes, I am plagiarizing. Come at me, bro. You want, mate. And we also outlawed child labor because, that was the thing we had to do for a while. We just decided, let's just get that done now, I mean, just why not? Heck, we even had a New Deal for Indians. We gave them back, like, tribal rights and shit, and let them school their kids at home and have actual tribal government. So that was pretty cool. Heck, we even had a black cabinet made up of a bunch of people supporting African Americans, including former president of the Chicago NAACP, Harold Ikes, and Robert L. Van and other people. Really doesn't matter. But there's also this person named Mary McLeod Bethune that was basically a huge representative for black women. Cool. Meanwhile, out in the Midwest, everybody's dying from dust. And then, so people started moving over to California because they lost everything to overwhelming dust because they overfarmed the land and fucked themselves over. And so all those people became known as Okies because they were from Oklahoma. Hardy har har. And whenever they went to California, everybody in California that was already there, like Mexican and Filipino farmers, were like, bitch, what the fuck? You're white. You get advantages. People are going to hire you more than us. Damn it. Fuck. And so they started making, like, unions, but it didn't work out too well. And there was also the Associated Farmers of California, made up of rich people that had a lot of power. So that kind of sucked. But there was also this thing called the Works Progress Administration, which gave a new deal to artists. So that we could have shit like jazz, because, I mean, I don't know. You like jazz? But they also had stuff like symphony orchestras, banjos, Texas fiddlers, theater productions, just artwork and things, so that artists could have work. Because we valued culture and things, and yes, we're very, very intelligent people. You know, that's why we're in this situation of crippling depression. Heck, the Wagner Act even, wait, I forgot. Oh yeah, the Wagner Act even helped out all the labor unions, which made the labor unions happy. And also there was a new one called the Congress of Industrial Organizations that came up out of the AFL that basically went like, hey, why don't we organize all of the workers? Kind of like the IWW, but not communist. And so, and workers started to figure out, hey, if we just sit down where we are, they can't put people in our place, because we're sitting in it. So sit-down strikes became a thing. Whoa. Heck, there's even a massive sit-down strike with the United Auto Workers Union that frickin' whipped General Motors. Like, nobody thought that would happen. However, not a lot of people, or rather, a lot of people liked the New Deal, but some people didn't like the New Deal. Those people joined up to create the American Liberty League with people like DuPont, the DuPont brothers, and Al Smith, and a bunch of other people going like, you're too fucking socialist. And then other people on the other side went like, you're not socialist enough. God damn, communism. But, and there was also this guy named Townsend that went like, hey, why don't we give like money to the old people so that we can retire and the young people can take our jobs? And all the old people and even a bunch of young people went like, yes, I like this idea. But, yeah. And there were also some other people like Huey P. Long and others that would start to, you know, become serious challenges for FDR. So, you know, things were looking a little bit rough for our socialist comrade. But in the end, he would become president for a second term. And he was also able to authorize his Secretary of Labor, Frances Perkins, one of the first women in a presidential cabinet, to start shit like Social Security so that old people could retire and young people could get jobs. Woot. Oh yeah, by the way, throughout this entire way, the Supreme Court's like striking down shit because they're conservative and like, what the fuck is this communism? This is not constitutional. So like they struck down like half the things, but eventually they didn't, and so they started letting things go again. And that was the thing. But yeah, the New Deal didn't solve our crippling depression. But what it did do was get us on the right track to solving our crippling depression. It was like the first 2 steps in the 12-step program. And World War II was all the other steps. So, that works out. And in the meantime, since we collapsed, everybody else in the world collapsed, because we're all a bunch of smart people that make smart decisions with no consequences. For example, Germany is actually falling apart, its banks are dying, its government's dying, its people are dying, and then, Adolf Hitler comes into power and starts doing crazy shit like Kristallnacht and starting a Nazi party. Like, wow, that's pretty crazy. And he even starts conquering stuff, like Austria, and Czechoslovakia, and Poland after making peace with Soviet Russia, and, we're not really controlling German expansion very well, are we now? That might be an issue. And also, Japan went like, hey, we don't have anything. Why don't we just take things? And so they started expanding into places like China with the capture of Manchuria and the rape of Nanking. That's pretty crazy. And China was also already having a fight between the communists and the non-communists. Spoiler alert, the communists won under Mao Zedong, but that's not until later. And so, in the face of all this, the League of Nations does nothing because it's a worthless organization. Great Britain and France does nothing because they're worthless, or they're not worthless countries, but they don't really want to do anything because they went like, we just went to war. I don't want to go to war again. So many lies, jeez. And Spain has a successful fascist revolution. Oof. Heck. Yeah, and definitely the United States as well is practicing an isolationist policy, being like, I don't give a fuck about Europe. Gosh, keep us out of this shit. I don't care about you. So yeah. A bunch of Jews tried to leave Europe as well because, Nazi Germany, but countries denied them. Even Jewish people in the US denied them because they're like, I don't want to deal with your shit. Just stay out. Just stay out. Okay? And so, eventually, we start thinking near, 1939 that maybe we can't really be isolationists anymore, seeing as Germany's starting to conquer everything in Europe. Might be a bad idea to let them do that. And that's the end of this thing. Good night.